Cobblemon is an incredible game with so many awesome features that sets it apart. However, there's so much awesomeness packed into this game that sometimes it's hard to know where to start. So today I'm going to give you my top 100 tips and tricks for Cobblemon. If you stick around until the end of this video, you are sure to become a Cobblemon pro. In fact, I guarantee you will learn something new in this video. So if you make it to the end of the video, comment down below how many of these tips you didn't know before watching. Also, make sure to hit that subscribe button if you really want to get as much fun as possible out of Cobblemon. But anyways, that's enough of me blabbering. Let's get into the tips. Starting off with tip number 1, this is one I definitely wish I would have learned sooner and it would have saved me a ton of trouble. And that is to always have a boat in your inventory. That's because if you come across a Pokemon like this, a shiny Mewtwo, and you have low-level Pokemon that you're not ready to catch them with, what you can do is you can actually trap that Pokemon in a boat. You can put the boat down, and if you push them into it, just like that, then they can't despawn. And that way, if you don't have Pokeballs at the moment, or if your Pokemon are at levels that are definitely not ready to take on a high-level Pokemon like this, then you can just leave them here until you're ready to catch them, and you can come back. Tip number 2 is that within village chests, you can actually find the link cable, which is usually a really late game item that you can't craft until you get to the end. But if you want to evolve some trade evolution Pokemon, go into some villages and you should find one pretty quickly. Speaking of trading, tip number 3 is that if you are playing with others in a multiplayer server and you want to trade Pokemon with them, you just approach them and then you simply click R on that person, just like you're sending out your Pokemon, and there will be an option to trade with them. Tip number 4 is if you want to battle a trainer, you'll do the exact same thing, but you'll hit the battle option instead of trade. Tip number 5 is to create an automatic apricorn farm. This is game changing. This will allow you to make as many Pokeballs as you want so easily, and you don't have to waste time harvesting with trees. It's also super simple to make. If you don't know how, I have a link in the description to my tutorial video. It will not take you long at all. Tip number 6 is very similar, and that's to have an automatic iron farm. If you have an automatic apricorn farm and iron farm, you will never run out of Pokeballs. Similarly, this farm is very simple, and once again, it is linked in the description for you. Now, I know some of you play without Minecraft mobs on, so a traditional iron farm wouldn't work. But luckily, there's a way around this. There are certain Pokemon that are actually very common that drop iron. The two best ones are Tinkatink and Era. They're both very common Pokemon. You can look up their spawn locations, and you can knock them out either with a sword or with your Pokemon. They'll drop raw iron just like this. Now, it's not every single time, but there's a pretty high chance of it. And so you can either hunt these down to farm iron, or if you're really sneaky about it, you can design a certain kind of farm to harvest them. Blaze powder is an extremely important item to get to the end within Minecraft. But if you're playing without Minecraft mobs, it can be pretty hard to get your hands on some because you don't have blazes to fight. But luckily, Ponyta spawns very commonly in plains biomes and has a chance to drop blaze powder. And if you get tired of looking for Ponyta, Magmar and Magby spawn very commonly in the nether, and they also have a chance to drop blaze powder. If you're interested in the exact ratios of how common it is for them to drop these items or where these Pokemon spawn, you can find that on the Cobblemon wiki. Tip number 9 is that you can get a Pokedex in Cobblemon called the Cobbledex using a super awesome mod. This is the Cobblemon Pokedex mod, and I will leave a link to it in the description of this video if you'd like to download it. It is a fully functioning Pokedex that you can use to track your progress, and I highly recommend it. Tip number 10 is that you can actually ride on different Pokemon in Cobblemon. You can fly on them or swim on them using another super simple mod. This is the Cobblemon Rider mod, and again, I will leave a link to this mod in the description. It works great. I highly recommend it. While we're talking about mods, my favorite mod has got to be the one that adds battable trainers, including the gym leaders in the gym challenge, into Cobblemon and makes the experience way more fun. This is the Radical Cobblemon Trainers mod, and I think it is the most important Cobblemon mod that you need to play with because in my opinion, it makes the game so much more fun. I even have a full tutorial on how to install this mod, so you can look into that if you're interested. And the next tip is a really important one. When you first start playing the mod, all of the trainers are gonna have the same textures and they won't look like they're supposed to. Brock won't look like Brock. Your rival Terry won't look like him. So if you want them to look right, what you need to do is head over to the Cobblemon Discord, go to mods and plugins, look up Radical, and here you'll find the Discord for the Radical Cobblemon trainers. And then what you can do here is you can search in here by clicking on the 3 right dots and search. And if you look up this comment right here by Matcher, you'll find this texture pack that you can install, and it'll work to give the trainers the correct texture pack. My next tip is on how to find fossil Pokemon. To find fossil Pokemon, you need to find fossil structures. One of the most common looks like this right here. You'll see some trees jutting out of the ground. So if you come over to these, all you have to do is dig way down through this wood. And if you dig all the way down, typically in the middle here, it'll go down for a really long time. You'll need to follow this until you find suspicious gravel, which will take some time. But once you get far enough down, there should be some. And then all you need to do is brush it with a Minecraft brush, and there's a chance that a fossil will come out. For the next tip, I want to talk about some of the best Pokeballs to use in Cobblemon. I'll show you how to craft each of these balls and why I think they're so helpful. The first Pokeball is the Quick Ball with this crafting recipe right here. This Pokeball will have 5 times effect on the first turn of battle. So this is super useful. I've caught a ton of rare Pokemon, even Rayquaza, on the first turn of battle, just throwing out a Quick Ball and not even having to fight the Pokemon. My next favorite Pokeball to use is actually the Timer Ball. If the Quick Ball fails, the Timer Ball is usually my next best option for catching legendaries and other rare Pokemon. This Pokeball has 4 times effectiveness once you pass turn number 10 in battle, which is twice as effective as an Ultra Ball. Costs just about the same amount to make. If you're in a long, drawn-out battle with a legendary Pokemon or a shiny, this is the ball you want to use. If you're trying to evolve a Pokemon with friendship, such as an Eevee or a Munchlax, I would recommend catching them in a Luxury Ball, which causes them to gain friendship twice as fast. The Luxury Ball looks really cool. However, I would actually say the Friend Ball is a better option. This one is even cheaper to make, but if you catch a Pokemon in this, they will start with 150 friendship, and a Pokemon only needs 160 friendship to evolve. And so this means you only need to gain 10 friendship points, which you can do extremely quickly by just fighting a few Pokemon. Speaking of Pokeballs, one of my best tips for you is to get Pokeballs as soon as you start the game. Try and hunt down apricorns and copper as soon as possible, because you don't want to run into a rare Pokemon like a shiny and not be able to catch it because you don't have Pokeballs. My next tip is to download a mod that allows you to catch legendary Pokemon. I've found that hunting down and catching legendary Pokemon can make any playthrough of Cobblemon so much more fun. There are a couple different mods that do this, but the one that I use is Cobblemon Legendary Structures. I found it works great. I would highly recommend it, and again, I'll have the link to this in the description of this video. I've already talked about the Radical Cobblemon Trainers mod, but I would highly recommend doing the gym challenge with that mod. I have found it makes Cobblemon so much more fun. I've been using it in my Let's Play on my channel, which you can check out if you head to my channel after this video. And we have had so much fun on that Let's Play. I would highly recommend it. It makes playing Cobblemon so much more fun. I found I get bored a lot more quickly without it. Next up, I would recommend farming every Cobblemon plant possible. Some of them, like medicinal leeks, may seem really boring and unimportant, but you'll find as you play more of the game that each of these plants actually has a really important use and can make the game so much easier if you have a steady farm of all of them. So anytime you see some Cobblemon plant growing around the world, I would recommend harvesting it. Speaking of useful items that can be crafted using plants in Cobblemon, filling up the restoration tank to get a fossil can take a long time with any normal plant, but if you use max revives, it only takes 2 of them to fill it up completely, which will save you a ton of time, and these can be farmed pretty easily in Cobblemon. I have a whole video about how to farm these on the Survival Guide series if you'd like to check that out. As a bonus tip, I would recommend that you subscribe to this channel right now. I post literally how to do every single thing possible in Cobblemon between the Survival Guide series and my tutorials. So if you want to learn about Cobblemon and you want to play the game better, this is the place to be. So hit that subscribe button and then make sure to watch till the end of this video and you'll be a Cobblemon pro in no time. My next tip is actually a data pack suggestion called the Cobble Towns data pack. This causes towns like Pallet Town here with Professor Oak's office, as well as there's a Pokemart over there, and you can get Pokemon centers to spawn naturally in the world, which makes for a really more enjoyable playable experience. Like I said, this is just a simple data pack, and I'll put the link to it in the description. One of the most useful items in Pokemon is the leftovers, which you can use to help a Pokemon restore health. And in Cobblemon, if you just eat an apple, there's a small chance that you will receive a leftovers in return. My next tip involves Mega Evolution. You've seen me do this a couple times here throughout the episode, and there's a mod that allows you to Mega Evolve Pokemon in Cobblemon. I think it makes the game a lot more fun. The mod that I use for this is the Megamons mod. I highly recommend it. I've had a lot of fun playing with it. I'll put the link to it in the description as well so that you guys can use that if you would like. The next tip is to always have a Pokemon in your party that has the move False Swipe. False Swipe is a move that cannot kill a Pokemon and at a minimum will only leave them with 1 HP. For example, this level 5 Pidgey here against this level 100 Ninjask, if I use False Swipe, Pidgey will be left with 1 HP, which in this case is 6%. This is really helpful for when you're trying to catch Pokemon to make sure you never knock them out. So I always recommend having a high level Pokemon with False Swipe. Ninjask actually is one of the first Pokemon I recommend you catch. He's extremely common. You can find him in pretty much any forest biome, which forest biomes are very common. He learns False Swipe very early on, so he's super nice to have on the team. Unfortunately, he is not that strong of a Pokemon, so later on, there are some better options I would recommend. Breloom is very popular because he learns the move Spore, which has a 100% chance of putting Pokemon to sleep. So Breloom is very good, but in my opinion, actually, the best Pokemon to use as a false swiper long term is Gallade. He's a little bit harder to get because Ralts is a rare Pokemon, and finding a Dawnstone can be a little bit tricky. But Gallade has access to False Swipe. He also has an extremely high attack stat, much higher than Ninjask, and he has access to Hypnosis. So he can get Pokemon down to 1 HP with False Swipe, put them to sleep with Hypnosis, and then it's very easy to catch them. Once you're established in the game, I recommend always having a Gallade on your team in case you run into a shiny. It makes it way easier to catch. Speaking of catching Pokemon, I highly recommend using the Cobblemon wiki. If you go to their Pokemon section and then Pokemon spawning, right here it'll show you where every single Pokemon spawns and their rarity. For the next tip, if you don't like going off to different websites while you're playing Cobblemon, this Pokedex from the Pokedex mod I showed you actually double functions as a spawn guide. Say I want to catch a Scyther, I just need to find his Pokedex number 123, and if I click on it, it shows me a little description here about Scyther, what he drops, and then it actually shows me where I can find him. If I level over it, it shows me all the different biomes, the level ranges that he's there, and the weight. So this is super useful for finding different Pokemon. My next tip is to craft an experience share as soon as you can. The experience share is crafted like this, and the experience share you can give to a Pokemon as a held item, which I guess I haven't explicitly said yet, but to give a Pokemon a held item, you just shift and right click with the item, and then you can either give it to him or take it back. But the experience share causes your Pokemon to gain experience even when they're not the Pokemon battling. And my next tip is actually still with the experience share. You can build as many of these as you would like. So right now I only have one, but I would recommend farming these materials. They're not that expensive to farm. Building 5 or 6 experience shares and putting it on all of your Pokemon. And this will make training so much faster when you're trying to level up. My next tip is for leveling up really quickly and getting Pokemon to level 100. I have a whole video about this, but essentially some of the most basic parts is to use the experience share that we talked about. And then the first tip I have is to go to a plains biome. Within plains biome, Bouffalant, Tauros, Miltank, and a couple other Pokemon will all spawn extremely commonly, and they'll usually spawn with really high levels, around the 40s and 50s, which is about as high level as Pokemon and Cobblemon can get. And right now I have the level cap on because I'm playing with the Radical Cobblemon Trainers mod. So Pokemon can't level up more, but you will get a couple thousand experience for each Bouffalant or Tauros that you take out, and they spawn constantly. There will always be a couple of them usually on the map, and I find this is a way to level up really quickly. It's how I got all of these Pokemon to the levels that they're at. If you don't want to do the plain strategy, or you want one that's even better, in my opinion, the best place to train is actually an icy biome like this, because Stantler and Weirdeer will spawn extremely commonly. And it's a very similar strategy. Make sure you have an experience share, and ideally a high level fighting type Pokemon is useful in both of these. And as you knock them out, you will get a ton of XP from each of them. As you can see from that one Stantler, I got over 3,000 XP. 2 Piloswine have already spawned over here. And then Weirdeer spawns quite commonly, and he'll give you even more experience. So if you go around with a strong fighting type Pokemon, like my Gallade here or Master Splinter, you can farm experience extremely quickly, and if you have 5 to 6 experience shares in all your Pokemon, they'll level up really fast. As you can see with those 2 battles, I got Archon from level 17 to level 22. Now just some general basic tips for you guys. If you want to check a Pokemon's stats, you can click here on stats. If you'd like to check their IVs, you can click on IVs. As you can see, my Gyarados actually has really good IVs in attack, special defense, and HP, but his speed and some other ones are pretty bad. So if you'd like to have a Pokemon with good IVs, you can catch a bunch of that Pokemon and check the IVs here. Their EVs, you can check here by clicking EVs. I've EV trained his attack, which is why it's so high. And then you can also check other here, and you can look at their friendship level. To evolve by friendship, you do need 160 friendship. And so it's really important to be able to check this here if you're using Pokemon Evolved by Friendship like I did with my Umbreon. If you're wanting to evolve a Pokemon by Friendship like an Umbreon or some other Pokemon, there's a couple different ways to do that. I talked about the Pokeballs that help earlier, but if you have them outside of their Pokeball and you just walk around with them, this will raise their friendship slowly, but it will raise their friendship. If you level them up in battle, that will also raise their friendship a few points. You can also craft an item called the Soothe Bell using 3 iron ingots, an iron nugget, and 2 wool like this. Then you can give that to your Pokemon by right-clicking and giving the give button, and then that will make them raise their friendship twice as fast. So for example, if you did that and you had caught them in a luxury ball, they would raise friendship 4 times as quickly. My next tip is for EV training, and it's actually the way I got that Gyarados' EVs completely maxed out. That is to use items called vitamins. There are several of these in Cobblemon, and their crafting recipes are here. And each one of these will raise a Pokemon's EV stat by 10, depending on the vitamin. For example, protein does attack, iron does defense, carbos does speed, and you can look up what each of these does on your own. But as you can see, all of the materials here are natural materials that spawn within Cobblemon, and you can farm every single one of these. I have an in-depth video that I'll link in the description that shows how to farm these EV training items, and you can use these to max out a Pokemon's EVs super quickly. Normally, to max out a Pokemon's EVs, you'd have to fight over 100 Pokemon to max out one EV stat, like this Squirtle's speed. But using these, which you can automatically farm to set up so you can have pretty much an infinite amount of these vitamins whenever you want, if you just give 25 of these to a Pokemon, you can completely max out their EVs. And yeah, it'll take a moment to set up these farms, but then you can continue that infinitely for as many Pokemon as you want. Now, in order to get these items, you do need berries, so I should teach you guys how to farm a berry. The next tip is to farm a berry. All you need is some water, some fertilized land that you can use with a hoe, and then you can just plant the berry that you found, and over time that will grow and you can harvest it, just like a normal plant in Minecraft. But not all berries are naturally found in the wild. If you want to have some of the more powerful berries, you will need to create a mutated berry. To do that, you need 2 compatible berries to be next to each other, such as the cherry berry and persimmon. Under the berry tree section on the Cobblemon wiki, it will show you the recipe for how to breed every single mutated berry. So the persimmon plus cherry berry will equal the figgy berry. And you can look through here for how to make every single berry that needs to be made through mutation. And then for the mutated berry to come, we'll bone meal these to speed up the process. You need these both to be fully grown next to each other. And then over time, if you just keep harvesting them, there's a small chance the mutated berry will appear. Now, I do have to admit, some berries really aren't that useful, but some are incredibly useful, so it's important to know which you should focus on farming. The most important in my mind are the ones that are used to make these EV training items. So the tomato, the koala, the kelpsie, the hondu, greppa, and pomeg. I would say these are the first priority for the types of berries you should try to make. Besides that, I'd say the other really helpful berries are these group right here, that can restore 1/3 of your max HP. I find those really helpful as well. So those are kind of the berries I would focus on if I were you. My next tip is to really focus on Pokemon drops because there are some really helpful ones. So if you go to the Cobblemon wiki, go to Pokemon drops, it'll bring up here, and you'll want to go click on this link to go to the Google Sheet. And this will show you what every single Pokemon drops and the percentage chance of that. So if there's any rare item you're looking for, I would recommend just searching it here. And let's say I want Blaze Powder, like we talked about earlier. It will show me all 30 Pokemon that have a chance of dropping Blaze Powder, and then I can hunt those. And you can also use the Pokedex mod to do the same thing. Dragonite is one of the best possible Pokemon that you can use in Cobblemon. Unfortunately, Dratini can be really hard to find because it has to be near water or underwater below Y level 32. Which makes it really hard to find. However, there's a hack I'm going to teach you right now to get Dratini extremely easily. So if you go into a cave and get below Y level 32, if you look and you check your spawn, you can only do this in creative, but I'll just show you to teach you the point in survival. You need to do rare because Dratini is a rare spawn. You'll see that the only rare spawns that can spawn in this cave are Mawile. But if you just add water like I did below here. So either if you find an underground lake, or if you can just go into a cave like this and fill it up with water. Then if you check your spawn and make sure it's rare again, you'll see that there's a 45% chance of Dratini spawning. So above there was 0%, but now there's a super high chance of Dratini spawning. So if you can fill a big underground area below Y level 32 with water, and then wait around for a few minutes, you'll have yourself a Dragonite in no time. Metagross is also one of the most powerful Pokemon in Cobblemon, and there's a tip to get Beldum really easily. In the end, Beldum is one of the only possible Pokemon to spawn, so go to the end, and if you walk around for at least like 10 minutes, you're almost sure to find a Beldum. The next tip is to trade with villagers. It's one of the easiest ways to get important Cobblemon items and Minecraft tools that will help you in your journey. My next tip is to play on a server. It's a way to have a lot more fun in Cobblemon so you're not alone. You can find a great list of servers in the Cobblemon Discord, and then down in the section that says server listings. Alternatively, you can just start your own server, which is also a huge way to have fun. If you're playing on a server, one of my biggest tips is to start a gym system, because I think that's one of the most fun things you can do in Cobblemon. Another great tip is if you're playing on a server, rather than trading with villagers, although you can still do that, is to create up different Pokemarts where you can sell items out of your own shop and others can do the same, and that's a great way to trade with each other. My next tip is to use a mini-map. It makes Cobblemon so much easier by showing nearby Pokemon and highlighting shinies. I'll put the link to the mini-map I use in the description, and I have a video going over how to use it. The next tip is also to get a mini-map that shows shiny Pokemon. Some will just show normal Pokemon. One I use will put a star by every shiny Pokemon, as you can see here, which makes it much easier to find shiny Pokemon. Next tip is how you can start with a shiny Pokemon easily. When you're creating the world, go to More, go to Game Rules, scroll down to Miscellaneous to where starters will be shiny, and click on. Then when you open up your new world and pick your starter Pokemon, you will see that it is in fact shiny. Speaking of shiny Pokemon, if you go into your modding folder and go into Config, Cobblemon, and main.json, you can scroll down to where it says shiny rate, and you can adjust this to whatever you want. Whether you want it to be 1 in 8,000, 1 in 100, 1 in 4,096 like the main Pokemon games, and that will change your shiny rate in-game. One of my big tips that's a little bit different is to build a house or some kind of cool structure in several different biomes. There are a lot of Pokemon that are rare and only spawn in certain biomes. For example, Squirtle only mainly spawns near rivers, or if you want a Mudkip, you gotta be in a swamp. And so I would recommend, rather than just looking around and spending hours looking and not finding, try and build something really cool in that structure. And while you're working on that structure, it's likely that the Pokemon you're looking for will spawn. My next tip is on how to catch Porygon. Porygon will only spawn near a PC. So if you want to catch a Porygon, the best strategy is to put a PC in every chunk if you measure chunks, or if you don't measure chunks, just throw a bunch of PCs down, spaced out fairly evenly, and if you wait around long enough, Porygon is likely to spawn. So I would recommend, again, doing this near your base or where you're working on a project. Wait till Porygon spawns, and then you can get rid of these PCs after. The next tip is that Grottle can evolve into different forms of Torterra depending on what kind of sapling it is holding. On the Cobblemon wiki, all the different forms and what kind of sapling it needs to hold to evolve into that form of Torterra. The next tip is that Arbok also has several different forms of what can be on its chest, many of which look really cool. These all spawn randomly, besides this last one right here, and so you'll just have to look around and find these, but this is a really cool hunt to take on. One of my other favorite ones is that there are special kinds of Miltank that spawn in mushroom fields biomes that you can try and catch. My next tip is that if you catch a Pikachu on a beach, it will be able to evolve into a Alolan Raichu rather than normal Raichu. And you can tell it's an Alolan Pikachu when its eyes are blue. Now, if you want the Hisuian starters, the strategy is very similar. Go to the Cobblemon wiki, and under the section Pokemon and Unique Forms, if you scroll down to the bottom, you'll see that Hisuian Cyndaquil spawns in Taiga, Nether Crimson, Nether Forest, and Nether Overgrow biomes. Hisuian Oshawott spawns in Stony Shore or Snowy Beach biomes, and Hisuian Rowlet spawns in Snowy Forest or Snowy Taiga biomes. This will also explain the differences that you can see on them to tell if you're catching the Hisuian version or the normal. You will find medicinal leeks growing throughout your world like this, and I would recommend that you harvest some by breaking them and then farm them, which you do just on water. because these are really useful plants. If you put medicinal leeks in a brewing stand with a water bottle, it will result in a medicinal brew, which is a really important item for making many different things in Cobblemon. Then if you go to a brewing stand and you put an orange berry in with medicinal brew, that will result in a potion. And if you put a citrus berry in, that will result in a hyper potion, which each look like this respectively. To craft a revive, you can use heal powder, which is crafted from revival herbs, and a honey bottle. And then to craft a max revive, you'll need 3 revives and a vivichoke, which vivichokes you can get from trading with villagers. If you want to craft a master ball, you'll need 2 shulker shells, a nether star, and 2 netherite ingots. If you don't have anyone to trade with in your world, you can craft an item called a link cable by using 1 copper ingot, 2 popped chorus fruit, and 2 iron. And then if you right click a tradable Pokemon like Machoke with that item, then you'll be able to evolve them without having to actually trade with somebody. My next tip is that with the Mega Evolutions mod, you can get evolution stones really easily. In this mod, Mega Geodes will spawn underground, which you will come across very often, and they will have Mega Evolution items like Gengarite or whatever Mega Evolution Pokemon you have, but they will almost always have an evolution stone in there as well. And so that makes for a really easy way to get evolution stones. The healing machine is now also really expensive and has become more of a mid to late game item. So if you can't get that for a while, you just use orange berries and your bed to heal up your Pokemon easily before you're able to craft a healing machine. Or if you're using the Cobbletown's mod, you can just find a Pokemon Center and steal one of their healing machines. After you've been playing Cobblemon for a while, you'll catch more cool Pokemon than you know what to do with. So there's an item called the Pasture block, which is pretty cheap to craft. And using this, you can show off a lot of your cool Pokemon that you don't have room to use in your party. You just enter them in like this, and they will begin to wander around in the space around the Pasture block. So there's a lot of cool design things you can do with this. Or if you're playing with friends and you have a mischievous brain like me, you can prank them pretty easily using a Pasture block by just digging down and placing in a pretty rare Pokemon, for example, a shiny Dragonite, if you have one, or some other shiny or rare Pokemon. Then you can just cover up the Pasture block here, and when they come to their base, they're going to see this Pokemon, and they will want to catch this Pokemon, but they won't be able to, and they'll have no idea why. My next tip is that you can actually use shears to farm wool off of a Wulu. You can also dye a Wulu like you would any normal sheep, and then when you shear them, you'll get that color wool. You can even go as far as to make an automatic wool farm like you would with normal sheep, using a dispenser and a hopper minecart underneath some grass to make an automatic Wulu wool farm if you don't have sheep in your world or if you just want to do it with Wulu. That's a great way to get some blocks, and it's really fun to do with Pokemon. You'll just have to use a Pasture block so that you can have the Wulu outside and not despawn. And I'll probably make a full tutorial about that at some point in the future. But for now, you can just copy a normal wool farm, just adding the Pasture block. Another tip I have, which is more of kind of a helpful warning, at least for now, is you used to be able to milk a milk tank just by right-clicking them with a bucket, but it seems as if that is no longer working in Cobblemon. This may be patched in the future, but for now, just to warn you so you don't get frustrated out there trying to milk a milk tank. Seems like it is no longer functionable, at least at this time. However, if you do have a milk bucket, you can actually use that to help fill up a restoration tank. And so it's not as fast as a max revive, but it is a lot easier to obtain. If you ride on a Pokemon in the Cobblemon Riders mod and you go underwater, you will notice that you can actually breathe underwater and your bubbles do not deplete, meaning you can infinitely explore underwater without having to have a potion of water breathing. If you come across an apricorn tree, you can actually add apricorn seeds to it to make a super apricorn tree that can spawn an extremely large amount of apricorns. My next tip is also with the Poketowns mod. Within the generated structures, you'll find a lot of cool Pokeblock items, like these Pokeballs and Ultra Balls here, and some other things over here that you can use as decorations if you just come in here and then you can steal them. Also, with the Pokedex mod, there is a reward system. As you catch more and more Pokemon, they'll actually give you some different items, and you can get some really good ones. For example, I got these ancient Great Balls and Pokeballs from catching different milestones here with the Cobbledex. So I would recommend catching as many Pokemon as you can with this mod installed. If you're trying to complete the Pokedex, the Safari Ball is one of your best options. It's extremely cheap to craft, and it has a greater effect outside of battle, so you can just literally run around and chuck hundreds of these at different Pokemon, and it'll fill up your Pokedex really quickly. Another Pokeball I would highly recommend is the Park Ball. It's also pretty cheap to craft, and it's 2.5 times effectiveness in forest or plains biomes, which is actually more effective than an Ultra Ball. And most of the time, if we're honest, we're usually in forest and plains biomes, and so this is really helpful for catching lots of Pokemon. I would highly recommend catching an Alolan Exeggutor because they are ginormous and it is hilarious. I can promise you, you will not regret having one. My next tip is to do normal Minecraft things. This mod is a combination of Pokemon and Minecraft, and it's best enjoyed when you do normal Minecraft things as well, like farming, trading with villagers, battling the Ender Dragon. It'll make the experience much more fun. A quick bonus tip is to check out my survival guide series here on my channel. In this series, I go through and do in-depth tutorials on how to do just about anything in Cobblemon. So if you want to learn more, this is the place to go. For the next tip, I would recommend building your base at an intersection between 2 or more biomes, because this will allow for a much broader type of Pokemon to spawn. So you'll get more variety in the Pokemon you can catch normally, as well as the rare Pokemon you can find and the shiny Pokemon you're more likely to encounter. My next tip is to make a specific shiny box in your PC, because sometimes when you have a big PC like this, shiny Pokemon can get lost in the hustle. And so I just find it nice to have it organized like this so you don't lose any of your shiny Pokemon or accidentally release one. My next tip is really important, especially if you are doing anything competitive in Cobblemon, and that's to use held items. Held items can really make a big difference when you're in tough battles, and there are so many of them out there. So whether you're using the Hearthstone or leftovers, I would definitely recommend held items. Every Pokemon has a nature that will up one stat and lower a different one. So for example, right now Tyrunt, his nature ups his special attack and lowers his special defense. But if we really want to be competitive, we'd want to change this to a more beneficial nature. You can do that with nature mints. Each of these influence a different stat. The red one does attack, the blue is defense, light blue is special attack, the pink is special defense, and the green is speed. And now you can make some mints that will change a Pokemon's stat by using these. You do 3 of whatever stat you want to increase. So for example, if I want to increase attack, I do 3 red, and then you pick which one you want to lower, typically the opposite one. So if I want to raise attack, because my Pokemon's a physical attacker, I'll probably want to lower special attack. And I put just one of those in the corner, and this will make an adamant mint. Then if I use right-click Tyrunt with that, his stats will change. Now you'll notice it still says Rash here. This doesn't change just because that's how the game is coded. But if you go over to his stats here, you'll see that his attack is now going to be boosted and his special attack will be lowered. There are certain Pokemon in the main series games that need to evolve at a certain location. For example, if you want an Eevee or a Glaceon, or if you want a Magnezone. However, in Cobblemon, it's a little bit different. They just replace it with evolution stones. So for Eevee, you can evolve it into Leafeon with a Leaf Stone. And with Magneton, you can just give him a Thunderstone. So this is really important to know so you don't struggle trying to evolve this. It's pretty much the same for any kind of location-based evolution in Cobblemon. One of my biggest tips for Cobblemon to have more fun is to make several different goals for yourself. Whether that's beating all of the gyms, completing the Pokedex, or even something random like catching every Pavilion form. I find this makes the game a whole lot more fun for me to play and helps me to not get bored. There are a ton of different biomes in Cobblemon and different Pokemon spawn in each of them. So one of my biggest tips is to create a nether hub that will connect all of your different biomes that you find in your world so you can get to them a lot quicker, so that when you want to find a Scyther later down the road, it doesn't take you forever to try and get back to that jungle biome. My second to last tip is that you can use waypoints within the mini map by clicking U and then going in here, and then you can add a waypoint for a specific location like home, and then that will guide you, and whenever you're off the map, it'll appear and you can use that to follow back and not lose your spot. And my final tip is to just have fun. This game is meant to be something that you enjoy, so if it's being stressful, make sure to change things so that you can have fun. Thank you guys so much for watching, and if you enjoy Cobblemon, consider checking out my best Let's Play series right here, and I promise you'll enjoy it. A special thank you to all my channel members. I really couldn't do this without you, and your support means the world to me. And if you'd like to become a channel member yourself, click the join button below to see the options.